Okay, this is a short tutorial just to show you how to create a stop motion animation using Adobe Premiere, which is quite a quick process. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to check my images which I've previously imported to my computer. Let's look at the properties. I'm just going to make a note of the frame size. I've actually used a smallish frame size, but it's still above what would be considered 1080. This has produced quite a grainy image because of the JPEG compression, but still will be acceptable for the output. Okay, so I'm just going to run through my sequence. It might be worth just having a quick look through preview to see what images I've taken. So I've just got some toys and taken some photographs like this. It's a bit jerky. I didn't even really have a tripod available, but it should be good enough to show the effect of and the process. So I've taken a few different types of shots. So there was a kind of a tracking shot, a bit of a pan, changing focus and zoom shots as well. So there's the change in focus, there's the zoom. Actually just cut straight from that back to the change in focus, which goes from background focus to a foreground focus. So that's one of the key considerations actually when you're working with stop motion, would be use of the camera creatively to simulate panning, focuses, zooms, other techniques, consideration for lighting as well, because that has a big impact. This was shot just under house lights, and so it's a little bit on the dark side. You can compensate for that with your camera, and you also really want to make sure your white balance is okay, because obviously if you're shooting underneath fluorescent lights you might get a bit of a blue cast. If you shoot under household lights you might get a bit of a yellow cast or even a red cast, depending on the pigment in the walls in the room, and light reflects. That's quite a bit of an impact. So just move this up a little bit. And I also shot a separate angle, which I did afterwards. Most of the shots were clear enough, apart from this one here, which is a bit blurry. I'm going to keep it anyway because it'll probably add to the effect. So I've got enough shots there to put together a nice little animation. I'm not going to bother with audio this time, so I'm looking for the start menu, programs, and then I'm going to find Adobe Premiere, which will be on the master collection on the college computers. Premiere Pro CS6. Okay, so now that Premiere's opened, I'm going to create a new project. Ideally, if you've got a second drive, you want to set your scratch disk up on the D drive. I'm going to use the C drive on this computer for now. I'm just going to create a temporary folder for this, which will be stop motion. Okay. I'm just going to select the folder down here and then set my standards and my scratch disk. So scratch disk same as project, so that should be okay. And obviously you need to make sure you've got enough space available, otherwise clear some off. So that's fine. I'll call this stop motion 1. Okay, and then set my standard. Okay, so given the camera that I've used and the output that I want, I'm just going to go with a 720 output. Yeah, let's take the Canon. And now I'll go for 24 frame. Click OK. Wait for that to sort it out. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bin for my photographs. So I'll have a bin for maybe angle 1, which would be essentially camera 1, and I'll have one for angle 2, which will allow me to separate or compartmentalize the shots a little bit. So when I've opened the bin up by double clicking on it, I can right click and import, and I'll go directly to that bin. I believe I've created this folder in videos or images. Oh, there we go. Stop motion test. And so from here I can see the images already, and it's from this point to this point I want for this shot. The first two shots are actually just test shots, testing focus, lighting, settings on the camera. You'll find when you're taking your photographs that really you want to be working in fully manual mode. You definitely want manual focus, because the autofocusing will probably become problematic, especially if you're working with depth of field. If you've got moving objects, if it's quite a complicated scene, it might continually focus on the wrong object. Equally, you can set the lighting to be standardized, whereas autofocus may jiggle around a little bit, and even fire the flash. So for angle 2, just bring in the remainder of my files. There we go. Open those. Okay, so by default Premiere assigns a time to each image. So if I was to bring these in now, each one would have a 5-second length. I think 5 seconds is probably a little bit too long, given the frame rate's 24 frames per second. I really want to be maybe looking from about 12 frames per second. It's not an awful lot of footage, but it should be enough to show off the technique at least. Okay, so I'm going to be looking for around each image every 10th of a second. That will give me 10 frames in the second, so we'll give that a go first. So I can select all the frames using Control and A if I've got focus on a specific bin. I can also just drag a marquee around every image, which takes a little bit longer. There are various other ways of doing it. If I then right click, I can change the speed and duration of each clip that I've selected. So rather than it being 5 seconds, I want it to be around 001. Okay, and then if I have them all selected, let's close this bin first. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the frames that I want to bring in at the same time. So I'm just going to run through these until it gets to the point where the tractor turns the corner, so about there. I'm going to select all of these frames at the same time. At the bottom here I'm looking to automate to sequence. So I'm just going to move that down there. Yeah, move the playhead where I need to put it at the start of the sequence. Click on this. I'm going to insert the edit, placement sequentially, and then just click OK. And that's pretty fast. To zoom in I can just press plus. So now I can see it's not a very long animation. I'm just going to press L to play through. That's very quick. J takes me backwards, L forwards. It's a little bit too fast. So I can select all of these clips at the same time. Hopefully right click. It's not playing very well with the video software. I'll have to do it in the bin instead. So I'm going to select all clips, and now I'm going to put them to a 20th of a second. Sorry, a 5th of a second, not 20th of a second. Okay, it's a little bit longer for each clip. I'll go back to the point where I want to bring that through. Which would be there. Same thing again. Bring them in to the start. It's a little bit longer now. You see in the timeline. So I can also press the spacebar to play through them, which would normally render. But because they're JPEGs, they are already rendered. Play that backwards. So you can see where the camera's jolting around and the objects are jolting around. It's quite a difficult skill to master, but for the example, blur there between the frames because it's cross dissolving, blending the frames in. It's done that itself, which by default will have been clip overlap, which we may want to reduce a little bit, or even take off the default video transition. It has made a bit of a time-lapse feel to it. We'll see what that comes out like. I'm also going to make the frames, the images the same size as the frame that I've chosen, or as close as they'll go. So I've selected them all and then scale to frame size. That fits them in. So now we should be able to see in the program window what it looks like over more. Okay, that's just looping over for me nicely. People brought the sequence in twice. Okay. So having deleted that extra sequence, that's where we're at. I'm going to want to insert after that point the next sequence from the second bin. So I'll just select those clips and make their speed duration the same length as well. So that will be 0, 2. Okay, and then I'll just bring them all in at the same time. I'll stick with the defaults for now. Click OK. Let's put them in afterwards. So now we've got a little bit of camera work in there too. Play this through in the program window. There we go. And then I'll just go back to my first bin, select the remaining clips from when the tractor stopped moving, which would be about here, and bring those in at the end. Okay, scrub through that. It's having quite a big effect with the transitions, so we'll see what it looks like. Play through from the start. That's close enough. Right, so that's an example of a stop motion. With your sequence, then we can export the sequence as media. I would probably choose something like H.264 in this case, and keep the frame size the same. It should be a relatively low file size, and also it should change that to stop 1. Put that into my temporary folder on the C drive. Save that. Export it out. It shouldn't take very long at all because you use image files. That took longer because of the video software that I've got running in the background.